You're listening to The Stuff You Need For, Episode 0, Podcasting Microphones, recorded March 17th, 2015. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of The Stuff You Need For. This episode will be on podcasting. I'm your host, Ben Anderson. I'm a software developer. I'm here in Seattle, and I currently work at Google. I've worked at Microsoft in the past. I'm generally interested in learning how things are done, particularly how to achieve professional results at various activities. And I'm also kind of a gearhead. I like to research, what things will give me the most bang for the buck in my various hobbies. And sort of interests I have outside of software development include photography, music. I play guitar, outdoor activities. I've done rock climbing in the past, camping and hiking, cycling, bike cycling, video games, home improvement. And this podcast is sort of an outlet for talking about all the gear and items for those activities. And joining with me today is my co-host, Erin Sterling. Erin is a middle school librarian and the host of Adequate Yearly Progress podcast, which you can find at adequateyearlyprogress.com, in iTunes and other podcatchers. Anything else you'd like to share?
I'm a middle school librarian. I'm also married to you.
It's true.
And I just started the podcast really as an amateur level. This equipment is not there. I just had kind of 2 microphones and a computer. And I have 13 episodes so far, so I have a lot of room to improve. So I'm excited for this episode as well.
All right. Yeah. So Erin got me interested in actually doing a podcast. And sort of the theme of this podcast, The Stuff You Need For, is we'll talk about the things you need for various activities, try to distill things down to the basics of what you need and how to use those things to get as close to professional results as I could, or hopefully you guys can give me advice in the comments if I missed something. I think all the gearheads out there will appreciate this. People who like to do and make things, and sort of maybe the difference between this and a lot of other alternatives is there's sort of, the amateur and the professional level at a lot of things. And if you're, an amateur, you go for the budget, for the least kind of cheapest thing you can. If you're a pro, you're willing to spend basically anything to get just marginally better results, because that's what gives you that edge out there. And this podcast kind of pays more attention to that elbow in the cost curve where, what do you need to get, really close to professional results? Maybe the equipment isn't as fast or as perfect, but hopefully it will allow you with a little bit of effort to really approach those levels of quality that you hear and see out there and won't get frustrated. So as we mentioned appropriately, this first episode will be on podcasting, and we'll talk exclusively about microphones. And we have an array of them out here on the table. So Erin's started her podcast with some of these, and we'll move our way up and discuss the differences between them. So the first and we'll also demo them in a little bit, but let's just talk about your options to begin with. So sort of at the very low level, and you can still get good results with these if you're a single person, are USB microphones. So we have 3 USB microphones here. Now, the first one is the blue Snowball, which Erin started with. There's 2 types of microphones here, and I'll discuss them when we get to the first non-condenser microphone. But just for now, know that it's a condenser microphone. Erin, do you have any thoughts on the Snowball? I know you've started with that before moving on to the Yeti.
So I think the Snowball is a great first USB mic, especially if you're just an amateur. It's about $30 to $50, depending on if you can get a deal on it. So it's a reasonable price because you basically need that and a computer. I also have a pop filter, which isn't shown here, but it basically prevents the P's and S's and noises like that from really sparking. But I think it works really well. You could go ahead and listen to some of the podcasts. I think it gives a pretty clear sound for the price that you give it. I mostly keep it on one setting. I mostly speak into it at a really close level because I've noticed that when I've used it with students and they're not trained to use microphones, it's really quiet if you get a little bit further back, and so the sound quality goes a lot down. But I think it's great for a beginner mic.
Yeah. So like I said, it's a USB microphone. It only has USB. It has some switchable capsule patterns, which sort of control which sides of the microphone you're likely to get sound from. It comes in a lot of styles and colors. It's like Erin said, it's often on sale.
Kids love the look of it also.
Yeah.
It's like people in general, they feel like it's a super cool looking mic, even though this is the nicer model. And
yeah. And it comes with this stand here. So, and then after that is the Blue Yeti, which is slightly more expensive. It sounds noticeably better. It's very similar otherwise, though. It's a condenser microphone. It has several patterns of which directions it picks up sound from. And actually, probably now is a good time to talk about what I mean by condenser microphone versus the rest of these microphones are dynamic microphones. Technically, it's basically how they generate the signal for the sound that matters. With a condenser microphone, I don't totally understand it, but basically there's electricity running through it at all times, and I think there's a flat sort of paper or disc thin thing that vibrates as the sound comes across it, and they're actually good at picking up noise from quite further away from the microphone. They're very sensitive. They pick up very quiet noises, which can be good if you're working with somebody who moves forward and backwards from the microphone compared to these dynamic microphones. You probably noticed as I moved back a little bit, it got much quieter. So if I sort of slouching over time and moving further and further away, I become difficult to hear. The downside of that, of course, is if you're not in like a studio environment, that's not great to be picking up the sounds all around you. So for example, even in here, which is in our home where there's a refrigerator running, there's car doors slamming outside, buses going by, and you really don't want that kind of distraction happening and being picked up during your podcast. So the other type of microphone that we're showing today is a dynamic microphone. There's no power running through it. It generates its own electricity, and that's what's picked up. They're less sensitive to like quiet background noises, which makes them a good option for podcasters. You'll almost always hear them recommended for podcasting or broadcast. I think they don't always sound quite as good, which I think is a great reason to go with a condenser microphone if you do have a quiet, soundproofed room. So that's the difference between the two types of microphones. So like I said, both the Blue Snowball and the Yeti are condenser microphones. Both come in lots of styles. They're both USB only. And when we do a demo, and we'll do them all in a row so you can hear the differences, the Yeti does sound noticeably better. It's a little bit more expensive. Kind of starts at $80 on the cheaper end. If you get one on sale, I've seen them as expensive as $120. And there is actually a higher up model called the Blue Yeti Pro, which is I think about $200. And the main difference is that one also includes what's called an XLR cable, and that's just a normal microphone cable like all the rest of a more professional microphone. But at that price, you could really go for more, pro microphones, or just spend a little more and get a much, better microphone. I also really like with the Yeti that you can plug in your headphones. I've actually just discovered this feature because I've just started using it. So my podcast lately, I'm still figuring out how to work it best, but if you plug in the microphone or plug in a headphone, you can actually hear yourself and hear the quality of the mic, which is really nice. And you can't do that in the Snowball. You have to plug it into a computer and sometimes futz around with it. Yeah. So that's a good point. If you plug in the microphone, you're not hearing any delay through the computer or anything like that. If you plug your headphones straight in, and you really should always have headphones plugged in while you're recording to make sure you notice, maybe your co-host is being quiet compared to you, or if you try to use, I don't recommend you do this, but if you try to use a single microphone to record two people, you really definitely need to be doing that so that just little differences in distance make a big difference in volume, and maybe somebody's quiet or not. And it's hard to do it while you're talking, but you should pay attention and make sure you're picking up both people well. So yeah, and then there's one more USB microphone I have to show. And actually, this one is the one that I would recommend for people starting out with podcasting, actually. This is the Audio-Technica AT2100 USB. There's actually ATR 2100. There's another model, the AT2005 USB, and they're basically exactly the same with different styling. Buy whichever one's cheapest, or if you really prefer the black model versus the silver, you can buy the other one. And there's a couple reasons that it's a great starter microphone. So it's like I said, it is a dynamic microphone, so it's good at rejecting background noise, although you still always need to be careful. It comes with the stand that you see here. Comes with the reason I really recommend it actually is it comes with both a USB connection, so you can plug it straight into your computer, and an XLR connection, which means you can connect it to more professional recording equipment. And actually, it gives you that ability to step up to more professional equipment when you want to, say, have a podcast with more than just yourself, or more than yourself and someone over Skype. So Erin, of course, has been doing interview-style podcasts for Adequate Yearly Progress. She interviews different teachers every week, or every other week, I think is the schedule for the podcast. Mm-hmm. And she's been using USB microphones the whole time. And there's some challenges with that. I don't know, maybe you could go into like the first things you noticed. And
so I guess the first thing I noticed, besides just the fact that, I haven't been wearing headphones. I'm still learning a lot about podcasting, but besides just the fact that people's voices vary depending on how far and away they are, and if they start slouching or if I start talking. Because one of the first things that happened is I think the second episode that I did, which I interviewed my mom, I was listening to it, and about halfway through the podcast, all of a sudden it started echoing. And I couldn't really figure out why, because it had been normal and then it was an echo. So basically I could hear myself slightly after, and it seemed to be picking up because of the way that both microphones were set up. So that's one of the first challenges that I noticed, and Ben can kind of explain why that is.
Yeah. So even before that, actually, it was really difficult to find software that would record.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Two USB microphones at the same time. And we found Cakewalk Sonar did that. It's one of the first like Windows only audio recording software for computers. And what Erin noticed eventually is it turns out there's a reason that most software doesn't allow you to have two USB microphones or two different audio interfaces plugged in at the same time and recording. And that was basically all the software and the drivers and the computing that goes into recording audio. There's some amount of delay between when the signal goes into the microphone and it gets converted and the drivers on the computer figure it out, and when it's saved to the track. And it turns out that is different for each audio interface that you might have plugged in, even if they're the same kind. So there was a slightly different delay between the two. She had two of these blue Snowball microphones. And what would happen is anytime there was one microphone was picking up the voice of the other person, because of the slight different delay, like often when somebody was laughing or something loudly, you'd hear, ha ha, like that there would
an echo.
An echo because of the different timing. Now, what you maybe you could talk about what you ended up doing for those first podcasts, and then how you adapted in further ones to sort of resolve that issue.
Like in the editing?
Yeah.
Well, one thing I did in the first is I just found a point at which there was like a loud noise between both. So maybe it was like a peak in laughter. And then I would kind of like expand the timeline until I could see where the peaks are, and basically move it slightly to match up. Then what I started doing is clapping. So I would give a big clap so that I could see the big peak, and then I would be able to line it up later.
Yeah, and that's actually a classic technique from movies. You've heard of like a clapboard, like the thing you see them flip with the title on it. That's literally for clapping, and it's what I'm going to be using as well. And that lets you sync up two things. So a clapboard in the movie would be to sync the hit in the frame with the audio track. In this case, it was two audio tracks that were slightly off. The clap was picked up by both microphones, and then Erin could like zoom in and align those peaks so that they're timed at the same time. Apparently, even if you do that, it can over time drift because there's different clocks and the different electronics, and the delay might not be uniform throughout. But I think it seemed to work pretty well with the clap. I think that drift maybe isn't something that most people would experience. So anyways, that's a very long-winded way of explaining why you might want to pick a microphone that has a standard audio cable on the way out, so that you can get a single audio interface in the future and plug all of your mics, and then all your in-studio people will be the same.
I mean, that said, if you are kind of an amateur and you're not a super sound techie guy, it is a great deal and kind of great for the learning expertise, like the learning curve. I felt like it was kind of like I plugged it in, I figured out these few quirks, and I was able to go along. And it sounds pretty good most of the time. I think the biggest thing is just people talking closer to the microphones more than anything.
Yeah. Well, actually, the nice thing about this Audio-Technica one is it's the same price. It's like $40 to $60 on Amazon usually. And you get a lot with it, and it will grow with you. So I think that's great. Honestly, if we were to do it again, we'd probably skip the blue microphones, even though they sound quite good for what they are, and work with the Audio-Technica one.
And these are the ones that I just bought for my library. I haven't used them much, but I want to be using them with students, and it will allow me to grow if I do get better, if I have students who are more audio experts or things like that.
Cool. All right. So those are the 3 USB microphones. They're all you need to do a podcast with yourself. If you do need to be able to plug 2 USBs in at once, so you do need to get something. Yeah. So if you have if you're recording on like an iPad, you might be hosed. But if you are recording on a computer, you'll probably have 1 or 2 USB ports, or you'll be able to plug in a USB hub. And if you want to plug into and do interviews, you can do the trick with a clap to line up to, and you will need to use something like Cakewalk, or there are a few kind of like homebrew things that might let you channel both audio to different tracks at the same time. Tracks are individually adjustable, or you might be able to just, monkey around with your audio settings to record both to the same track. You won't be able to adjust individual people's volumes. It'll just be what it is. So make sure you are paying attention and using headphones, and sort of being a taskmaster when it comes to mic discipline. Establish with your interviewees ahead of time, like some signal to say, hey, get closer to the microphone.
You can listen to my podcast for rookie mistakes.
Yeah. Well, luckily Erin had 2 tracks, so she's mostly been able to adjust the volume if needed. And so there's kind of another line of microphones that are more expensive that are designed for podcasting. That's the Rode microphones, Podcaster and Procaster. They are both dynamic microphones. The only difference is one is a USB only microphone and one is an XLR only. They're $230. I didn't bother getting one or renting one or anything. I think if you're going to spend $230, you might as well bump up to the next price range. Without spending very much more, you'll get into like what broadcasters and radio, or the more professional
your NPR podcast.
Yes.
Serial.
Yes. I don't know what microphones they use for those, but DJs, that kind of thing. would use for just a little bit more. So the next up is this microphone that I'm speaking into. This is the Heil PR40. It's used by nearly all of the hosts on the Twit network. It's Leo Laporte's network of podcasts. It sounds good. It's like a deep booming voice microphone. It's an XLR only. It's for the microphone itself. It's not only. It is $320, which is expensive. It's a big step up from like the $30, $40, $60 microphones, but not that much from a Rode Procaster or Podcaster. And one of the great things about both of these microphones is that you can purchase them in a bundle from BSW USA, Broadcast Supply World, and that bundle is only a little bit more expensive. So just the microphone's $320. The bundle is, I think, $370. It includes this boom arm here. It includes a shock mount, which is this device that suspends your microphone in some wires that isolates it from vibrations from the table and things like that. And it includes this pop filter. Now, a pop filter is for making it so you don't hear like plosives, which are sounds like p, t, t. So even though I'm like being pretty explosive there, you're not hearing them. When we demo some of these other ones, which have no pop filter, you'll notice it. And the microphone itself even has a lot of, with this more expensive microphone, a lot of foam and things inside to prevent that kind of problem. Really, the only thing I don't like about the setup is these springs here. You'll probably be able to hear them if I tap the thing. There's like a special sci-fi effect if you bump it. So part of the whole point of having an arm like this is to be able to, adjust your microphone. And there's too many times when I've done that, or I've hit the cable or something, and then you get this dinging noise, which is unpleasant. So yeah, that's $370 for the whole setup. I think it's mostly a way for them to get around the manufacturer price restrictions. These devices like Nikon cameras, Apple, there's generally speaking, there's an agreement between the manufacturer and the retailer that they will only sell it at a certain price, or the manufacturer won't sell the retailer the product. And they're able to include all these things, which actually individually, like the retail price is like over $100 for a lot of these different pieces, which is kind of insane, for only $50 more. Yeah, so that's the Heil PR40. After the Heil, there's sort of there's a series of microphones from Electro-Voice. Now the RE20 is the classic one you'll see everywhere online. That one's actually quite expensive. It's I think $450 or $500, and it's a real classic broadcaster voice, radio voice microphone. But this model is similar in its exterior, at least. It's the Electro-Voice RE320. It's got a bit more high-end, like bumped up a little bit. I guess it was originally designed as a kick drum mic, but it has some properties that are interesting for voice as well. So one is, like I said, it's a little bit of it's boost to the highs and to the lows. There's actually two patterns where you can change the curve even more. And the other thing that's interesting about it is it has all these grills across it that are designed to allow you to sound similar to, regardless of how far away you are from it. So one thing about microphones is if you talk real close like I am now, they get more booming usually. And if you go far away, it'll sound thinner and thinner and emptier, even if you turn the volume up. But if you see how Erin speaks.
If you speak really close to it, this is how it sounds. But as I'm getting further away, I don't know. It sounds nice still.
Yeah, so I think you could get even further away. And
hello, further away.
And the general character of the microphone is supposed to be similar. I think it still gets a little boomy when you get close.
Yes, it does.
But apart from volume, it's a little bit more similar sounding across the board as you move away. And I guess should also mention that I think the RE20 is used on the Vergecast, as far as I can tell, which is the podcast from The Verge, which is, if you're into electronics, that's probably a website you're familiar with. And then after that, you can spend as much money as you want. There's lots of high-end condenser microphones that sound great. But I mean, if you have money to spend, go for it. But make sure you have a quiet, kind of acoustically suited space for them. Like, I don't know much about sound design, but I think there's even like, you want the room the right dimensions, and you want it soundproofed from other stuff. But yeah, I think that's probably beyond what any hobbyist would be. Go
then get yourself a job.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, those condenser mics will sound great. Probably much cheaper ones also sound great. But there's a lot of convenience to be had around not having to worry about having a specific room for your podcasting and audio needs. Yeah. So other than that, I think we'll do a demo, and I want Erin to do the demo, because look, you can find demos of all these microphones online, but it's almost always a male speaker. I found a female singer once doing demos of various microphones. But I think it'll be useful for people to hear Erin's voice. I'll ask Erin to maybe just do sort of a little intro from your podcast on each microphone, and we'll go through the line, and I'll edit in the USB ones afterwards. I have them recording separately, and you'll be able to hear what they sound like. So why don't we'll start with the Blue. We'll just go down the line, have Erin try the PR40. You've heard the Electro-Voice, but we'll do that again as well. And yeah, let's start out with the Blue Snowball.
Okay. Is it ready?
Yes. Yeah, it's ready. Go for it.
Welcome to Adequate Yearly Progress, episode 13.
All right. So that was the Blue Snowball for everyone. And we'll be moving on to the Blue Yeti.
Welcome to Adequate Yearly Progress, episode 13.
Here, do it one more time, just straighten it.
Welcome to Adequate Yearly Progress, episode 13.
All right. So now Erin will be moving on to the Audio-Technica. And actually, I'll have Erin hold it, and we'll demonstrate some of those plosives with this, because this has very little foam or anything inside it. So in just a moment, you'll hear Erin.
Welcome to Adequate Yearly Progress, episode 13.
So you probably noticed that in the P's and things, there was a pff noise as the air went through that microphone. Here, I'll demonstrate again and show on video. You'll be able to see this. On audio, what I'm doing is I'm switching it from, right now I am directly in front of the microphone. So if I say ba or pa or ta, you probably heard that noise. One thing you can do to sort of avoid that, other than just getting a cheap windscreen foam thing or a pop filter, which is a ring with a foam in it, is you can just talk like this. You can move the microphone at an angle, so it's still pointed towards my voice, and I'm still quite close to it. But now when I say pa or da or ta, it doesn't make that noise. Pa, ta, da. See, that was with the microphone directly in front of my face. Now if I have it at a 45-degree angle, so my air is kind of going past the microphone, ba, ta, pa, you don't really have that as an issue. So again, this is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100 USB. All right, so while Erin's getting, actually, Erin, you can leave the Electro-Voice aside, right, yeah, and we will put Erin on the Heil PR40, which is the microphone I've been using. Just a moment.
Welcome to Adequate Yearly Progress, episode 13.
So that was Erin on the Heil PR40. And finally, we'll have Erin do the same thing on her microphone, which is the Electro-Voice RE320.
Welcome to Adequate Yearly Progress, episode 13.
And that was the RE320. And one last thing I should mention about the RE320 is you can also get that one from BSW USA in a bundle package. But in that case, it only comes with this arm and shock mount. The audio cable has both come with an audio cable and the pop filter. So it ends up being the same price, $370. I think starting price on this one without the accessories is $300. They both come in a nice box. So this is the RE320. This is the Heil PR40. They both come in with nice carry cases, padded carry cases. I think the Heil is a little bit nicer. But yeah, so the main difference is the Electro-Voice does not come with a boom arm. This is Erin's boom arm from her previous podcasting. It's a Rode arm. I like it in the sense that it does not have the annoying dinging noise of the springs. It doesn't quite articulate as far, so you can see with the Heil boom arm, I can move it all over, very low and across. No problem. This one, you can't really move it as far back. That's as far back to the left as it will go, or your right, our left. Although it does move out as the Heil does. So yeah, so that's microphones. Thank you for listening, everyone. Hopefully you learned something. Again, I think great starting option is the ATR 2100. It sounds good. It doesn't have as much of the high end as some of the other ones, but I think sounds great. I think without A-Being it, you wouldn't notice it. You can plug it straight into your computer and it will grow with you. You can keep it as a backup microphone, or like maybe if you have more people when you move on to better things, and plug it in with the XLR cable into an audio interface. Otherwise, we'll be doing a follow-up show where we talk about some of the other accessories and accoutrements, including what you need if you want to record with a separate audio interface, multiple microphones at the same time, that kind of thing. Otherwise, please leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions or anything we should know. In the future, we'll probably do episodes on things based on our interests or interests of people we know, but feel free to make suggestions as well for things you'd like to know the stuff you need for. Thanks for your time, and
have a good night.
Thanks for listening to The Stuff You Need For. Find us online at thestuffyouneedfor.com, our YouTube channel, or in your favorite podcatcher. You can find Ben on Twitter at Adjustable Bias. You can find Erin's podcast, Adequate Yearly Progress, at adequateyearlyprogress.com or in your favorite podcatcher.